Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Everyone.
How are you?
Doing great. How are you all today?
Doing good, thank you.
A loaded question. There's a lot of people.
Yeah,
This is true.
Started in just a minute.
Caitlin, hey.
All right.
Okay, it is about 5:02. What do you think, Joanna? Should we do another minute or two? Okay.
Yeah, let's give it one more minute.
Hi, Jennifer.
Hi, everyone. Nice to see some friendly faces.
Yeah.
All right, let's get going, and we'll just, Lisa, if you could keep an eye on the waiting room as we get started to let folks in.
I shall do that.
Thank you.
Okay, hello everyone. Welcome, welcome. My name is Cheryl. I serve on the board as a membership co-chair of Conscious Capitalism Bay Area chapter. And we have a really wonderful event today. I am so excited to introduce our speaker, Pamela Gray Daniel. She is the author of Healing Our History and Co-Creating a Culture of Oneness, a playbook written to guide individuals through the process she believes is necessary to see actual change in the world. For over 25 years, Pamela has worked as an advocate for social unity. She seeks to empower, educate, and encourage individuals to be open to receiving others in a way that transcends trivial differences to create a world that works for us. And our speaker is Johanna Lyman. She is the board president for CCBA. Her day job is she's principal consultant and practice leader for culture and inclusion. Her mission is to change the face of capitalism so we build a just and equitable economy for all. So I am really excited. You're in for a treat, I bet. And so yeah, Johanna, take it away. Johanna and Pamela.
Great.
Thank you.
And so I realized, Cheryl, that I forgot to tell you that my company has just gone through a merger recently, which is very exciting. And the new name of our company is Cadabra. So stay tuned, we're doing some rebranding, and that'll all be unveiled in the next month or so. I want to start with something that I've been doing in some of the communities that I'm in, and it's a new practice for us here at Conscious Capitalism Bay Area. And that is to do a land acknowledgement. And what that means is simply we acknowledge whose land we've settled on. And so I'm in the San Jose area, and I have settled on the land of the Ohlone Tamian tribe. I'm originally from Massachusetts in Nipmuc territory. So, and we also like to use our social identifiers, even though I bet we're going to get into this a little bit today. But so I identify as a queer, cisgendered white woman with ancestry from Ireland, except for the 10% that was probably colonized from England and what's now Finland. So that's me. And Pamela, where are you?
Hello, my name is Pamela Gray Daniel. I'm a social unity and oneness practitioner, and I live on the land of the that was cultivated and belonged to the Powhatan people. And I identify as a straight cisgender descendant of Africa.
Great. Thank you. So Pamela has written this wonderful book that I'm going to do a little show and tell on if I can, that I have scribbled all through with like, yes, and what about? So I've given you some heads up with some questions that we might be asking. And so, you know, the biggest burning question that I have, probably two, but I'll start with just one. How do we both stand for the truth of who we are in essence and work to change the systemic oppression that is clearly so front and center in our culture right now?
Yeah, sure. So what I believe is that the truth of who we are has been lost to us, that we have really in many ways been pulled away from our true nature. And I believe that our true nature is this benevolent presence. It's in our very existence. It's what gives us life. And so some people call it spirit, some people call it God, some people call it pure positive energy, but whatever you call it, that is where we, that's our original nature. That's how we are connected to others, and that's what makes us equal, right? And so if we don't understand equality on an energetic or a spiritual level, there's no way for us to really understand how someone who looks like me is equal to someone who looks like you, right? Because we're saying, well, no, the skin color is different, the hair is different, it's all different, so how's it equal, right? And so we have to really begin to strip away this notion of our physical bodies being any more than an expression of our being, right? So our value, our power, who we really are is in this oneness with this presence that created us. And so we have to kind of row back to that place so that we can understand what equality really means. And then once we get there, then that's the mindset in which we approach and interact with every individual, all of creation actually, because we understand we come from this same source, that we have the same, the fiber of our being is the same and is united. We understand that what happens to one of us is happening to all of us. We're all extensions. And so when we understand that in our minds, but we integrate it into our hearts and into our actions, that is what I believe is going to make this durable change from seeing an injustice happen to someone who's on the other side of the world and it doesn't really affect me, that I think, because it's not me. But when you see that person as you, as an extension of you, the urgency to see our world transformed into something that works for us all is what drives us.
I think that's the difference between now and previous times of civil unrest or the civil rights movement in the 60s. It seems to me that there's more of a heart opening. You know, Dr. Diane Johnson, who's one of our board members, says, you know, the first thing white people do when they're looking at something like this is they form a book club. And we've done that historically. Like, I have had a really good intellectual understanding of racism since I entered college and was indoctrinated with what would now be called anti-racist training as a resident assistant. But it has hit me in such a different way. And I think it's that, like, bringing it down into the body and being able to move from there. So what stops us from being able to do that?
Sure, it is there's a couple different things, to be honest with you. I think the first thing that really stops us is that we are a people who hunger for knowledge, right? We want to read, we want to get all the information. And what happens is we begin to intellectualize things. And I think there's a really great value in you learning history and learning the things that are done. But I think that there's a point where you can be learning and never applying and integrating into your behavior. And so I think there's a holistic practice of, incorporating the mind, incorporating our actions, our body, incorporating our emotions, like emotional intelligence, understanding what blocks we have that keep us from being active, keep us from speaking up when something happens, keeps us from really having the amount of compassion to see that homeless person as having the same value as me, and keeps me from generosity in that area. And so it's really about having, again, I have to go back to this spiritual aspect of it, where if we understand the value, the intrinsic value of every individual, and then we put on top of that our head knowledge, the knowledge that we gain from reading, and then we integrate it with our physical bodies and we put it into action. And then emotionally, we're dealing with the things that are coming up that may hinder us from integrating. We have this holistic approach that isn't just about the letter of the law, following a law because someone says it's right. It's about understanding the spirit of the law. So, you know, all these civil rights, I write in the book about how, you know, we're like 60 plus years past a lot of these laws that were instated to make sure that people weren't discriminated on. And part of the problem was that people were just following a law. They didn't understand the spirit of it. And so I think that we've done folks an injustice of not sharing with them why inclusion is important, why access for other people is important, why equity is important. And so it's really about let's dial down to the basics. Let's get back to this basic notion that we are equal, and how do we integrate that? How do I challenge myself when I don't feel that I'm equal to somebody else? How do I do that? And so it's really about a conscious practice.
So what I'm hearing you say is that the baseline is this understanding our intrinsic, implicit value as human beings, regardless of who we are, where we are, what we're doing. It reminds me of Bob Chapman, who's a luminary in the conscious capitalism world. And he said he had this light bulb moment for himself where he was at a friend's wedding and she was being walked down the aisle by his friend, and he realized, like, wow, she's his precious child. And then it rippled out. He's like, whoa, everyone is someone's precious child.
Yeah.
And it completely transformed how he led his people.
Wow.
And I think that's not something that we talk about very often. You know, we talk about, like, you got to understand, you got to learn about systemic racism, you got to learn about microaggressions, but this idea of the intrinsic value and the precious child.
Yeah. You know, I think there's also, like, I always feel like there's layers to everything, like, you know what I mean? And so I feel like there's even a layer behind that that's like, yes, they're someone's precious child, but they are an extension of the power that creates universes, that never duplicates itself, that is benevolent and life-giving, and that it's full of creativity and you know, all of these things, and that they have a piece of that divine presence, of that energy. They have a piece of that, and they're here to share that with us.
Yes.
Like, we're missing out on so many gifts because we don't value them in a way that understands who they really are. And so that's, that oneness practice is something that it's a daily, moment by moment challenge, especially when people are behaving badly, right? You know, like, you know, when there's people who, you know, are just challenging that idea that, are you really connected to me? Do we really want the same thing? But understanding that it's in there too. It's in them as well. And so it's our job to really search for that, nurture that, speak to that.
Yeah. Great. Just gonna check the notes here. So you talk a lot in your book about the reason we can't see our unity, our oneness. I can't see me and you can't see you and me, is because of childhood and ancestral wounding. Right? Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I think I think it's this idea of you know, we come here and we're a blank slate, right? We have no prejudice, we have no bias, all of those things. We just exist, and we already have this value that you know, of all the gifts that we've come to bring to this world. I like to say, like, we are the butterfly, the caterpillar that has all the butterfly components in it. It's just waiting for it to be nurtured and emerge, right? And then we go through this series of socialization that really just damages us. It's not intentional. These people are well-meaning, right? Our parents teach us what they've learned, and often what they've learned was what they've learned from someone else. And there's so much misunderstanding, there's so much miscommunication, there's so much fear of the differences, and so, you know, we're traumatized in a way, right? And trauma just means it's something that we can't emotionally understand or you know, deal with. And so we don't understand who we are, and then the world begins to tell us who we should be and what's right and what's wrong, and it's confirmed through church and school and the government and all of those things, and so that creates more tension, more separation from our true nature. And then as we get to this part where we're, you know, just torn, you know, just broken, just not connected at all to who we are, we get to this place where we begin to feel like this can't be it, right? And so it's really important that when we come to this place, we do the work that we need to do to heal so that we don't continue the cycle. And so, yeah, we're wounded by the world, but I feel and I believe that we came to do that. Like, we came to experience all that so that now, once we get to this point where we are able to stand in the strength of who we are, there is no question. We just have resolve. And now we move into this next part of our journey, which is continued expansion in finding out more about the rest of us, the rest of who we are. And that's you, Joanna, and that's you, Cheryl, and that's you, Alex, and you, Bridget. It's us getting to know one another and working together to achieve this world that has so much potential if we just learn to put our differences aside, celebrate our differences even, and work together to create something beautiful. I think that's what we're really here for. So.
Yeah, thank you. I love that. I totally am with you that I think, you know, we come in here for many reasons, but all of the stuff that happens, the good, the bad, and the ugly, as we're growing up, you know, it all, to me, it informs what our sacred work is. Mm-hmm. I would not trade, I had a lot of bad things happen to me in my youth, and I would not trade one of them, because I wouldn't be sitting here, I wouldn't be doing the work that I'm doing to change the face of capitalism, to really, like, I'm in such an incredible position right now to change the way capitalism works, you know, so that it works for everyone and for the long term, to steal from our B Corp friends. Like, just, so I wouldn't, like, we think of the wounding sometimes as a mistake, but I think of it as really part of our divine plan. And that said, as we're like sort of skirting around the, I'd love to, and you know, this is not a bombshell for you, you knew we were going to talk about this. I'd love to talk about how what we're talking about is not spiritual bypassing. No,
it's not spiritual bypassing. So I've heard the term spiritual bypassing. I will tell you that it triggered me when I first heard it. Because spiritual bypassing, from what I understand, is this idea that everything will be all okay, we're just gonna pray, it'll be fine, right? And so it's bypassing your responsibility with spirituality. This is combining our responsibility with our spirituality. And so there's certain truths that that exist in the universe. And so if you live by these truths and you know that these laws work, the divine law of one is oneness. That's this understanding that we're all connected, that you know, we all are equal. These principles have to be understood in order to get to a place of understanding of what equality is. And so what we're talking about is connecting spiritually, and then like Joanna, like what you were sharing is do what your hand knows what to do, right? There's this Japanese word, it's ikagai, and it's the understanding that, you know, you have a life purpose of reason for being, right? And it incorporates what the world needs, what you're good at, what you're passionate about, and where it overlaps is your ikagai, right? And so, yeah. And
ultimate
so,
Venn diagram.
yes, I love Venn diagrams. And so what you just described is spirituality, but then what is your passion? And how are you using that to transform the world? And that's what we're really talking about here. Now, everybody's passion, everybody's talent, everybody's what they can give the world looks different. So this is one thing that I'm concerned about when it comes to a lot of people claiming that people are spiritual bypassing, is you don't know what they may be doing that is what their hand is to do. Like it may be to speak to people on a spiritual level and empower them to make a difference. It may not look like someone, you know, I was talking to my husband earlier today, and he's a protester. He's a person out in the street. Me, I have to anchor in oneness, right? And that's an energetic, that's a practice. And what I understand is that a lot of times at these protests, which are amazingly beautiful events of solidarity, there's also a lot of energy. I'm an empath, I'm sensitive to energy. I can't do certain things.
Yeah,
You too. So there's certain things that I can't do, but I shouldn't be judged because I don't do it, because that's not what my hand has to do. Now, I have a background in theater. I love storytelling. I'm a person who loves creating relationships with people and telling stories to empower people. I think outside of the box. I'm very strategic and relational. And have you ever done the strengths test?
Yeah.
Mine is like Zen, relationships, and strategy. Like that's who I am, right? Yeah. So I'm a thinker, and I'm going to be thinking of ways to describe something to someone in a way that they haven't gotten it for. And so what yours is to do, what mine is to do, is going to look different. And the spirituality component is so important. And our spirituality needs to prompt us to this being a change agent. But what it looks like is different for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm also, you know, I can do socially distanced protests. I've got my signs. We stand in the corner and make people beep at us, you know, but I could never be in those big crowds.
Yeah.
I'm really clear. My lane is around changing the way the economy works, right? Which is not a small lane.
No.
With spiritual bypassing, I had a conversation with a friend who is very spiritual, very law of attraction, has, you know, completely transformed her life in positive ways. And she wasn't able to be in a challenging conversation where a person of color challenged her and said, you know, what, like, I forget exactly the context, but I think it was, are you telling me that that I chose for my ancestors to be slaves? And she just got really triggered and she shut down and she just couldn't be in the conversation. So I think that's where, like you said, I love this so much, combining our responsibility with our spirituality and understanding what our responsibility is, but that we all have a responsibility toward equity and inclusion and belonging.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think part of our responsibility in this spiritual aspect too is to learn how to emotionally regulate ourselves, how to hear. First of all, law of attraction says that you only attract what you're putting out, right? So the idea that she attracted the conversation was the opportunity for her to learn and grow, right? And so so, you know, I think of every situation I come in contact with, if it's someone who, you know, misunderstood something that I said, or is opposed to something that I am for, I have to look at those as opportunities to embrace oneness, to embrace inclusion, to not, one of the issues that, not issues, but one of the things that I begin to see in the DE&I world is this lack of inclusion of people who don't have the same views on DE&I, right? And so it felt hypocritical. It began to feel really hypocritical, like, and almost as if it was just a club that was for people who were oppressed, and it wasn't a conversation that people who experience some type of privilege could be invited into.
Right, but we can't solve the problem without including everyone.
Everyone, yeah.
We're all in this. I actually had a really powerful moment about a month ago where I, actually a wonderful friend called me in and said, your posts on Facebook are a little rough. and I was, it was like early June, I think. So I was really angry. I had this righteous anger. Mm-hmm. But I also had this knowing that that's not who I am, and that it's not going to solve the problem. So I, gave myself permission to have a little bit of that righteous anger for a while, but then it's like, how do we move to something that's actually going to create change? And the big thing for me was moving from anger to curiosity.
That's great.
So powerful.
Yeah. Yes, wow, that's a whole situation that I just had earlier this week, right? So anger to curiosity, right? Curious, not furious. Right. So there's a company, it's called Think Kids, and they teach what's called collaborative problem solving. And it's really to help kids who are challenging and the adults that take care of them come to common ground about their lagging skills, right? And so I had to have, it's called Plan B, like a Plan B conversation with someone where I knew that this person believed a lot of the same things that I did. And it was actually somebody in one of my spiritual communities. And I was very much triggered by the things that she was saying. And I couldn't understand how she could feel that way. And so I decided, okay, I couldn't get it out my spirit. So I was like, I have to have a conversation with her. And, I touched base with her. And this is how, this is like my oneness practice when it comes to curious, not furious, having these conversations, unifying conversations. So go in with praise, right? I'm so grateful for you. Like, I really do. I see your heart. I know who you are. Unifying at that oneness place. And then just saying, I saw this, like, can you explain this? And even being a little vulnerable to say, you know what, I realized that this triggered me because I experienced this before from someone else, and it felt like a betrayal. And so I'm, so I know this isn't about you and what you're saying, but I want to know if you can help me understand what you mean by this. And what that does is it allows us to open up, it allows us to expand. So I talk about these expanding emotions and contracting emotions. When you're triggered, you're contracting. And I love how you said reaching for something that's higher, right? Something that's a higher vibration that allows you to expand and receive and unfold into a newer place in your life. And so having those conversations help us to grow, because otherwise we stay in comfort zone, and that's not growth zone. So I love that you said that. And yeah, it's absolutely something that we have to practice more of.
Yeah, definitely. And unfortunately, I think what's happening in the country is deliberately trying to divide us even more. So it's like all of us spiritual warriors, conscious warriors, like it's time to double down on the curiosity and the inclusion. And, I know for a fact that the folks on the other side of the aisle from me are not receiving the same information that I am from the media. So it's really, to me, it's really about interpersonal connections. Like, how can you have those conversations? You can't have them if you're furious.
Yeah.
you can only have them if you're curious and come from a place of, here's where we agree. Can you help me understand?
Yeah.
I appreciate that framework.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, let's see. Got a couple other questions here. There is a quote that I just absolutely loved that you said, difference is a dangerous divergence and conformity is superior and safe. So we were just kind of talking about this. So, and that has to do with the limbic system. So how do we override that?
Yeah, I feel so. So I was saying in that quote, because it sounds like I was saying that difference is dangerous. But what I was saying is, this is how we behave, as if difference is, this, it's terrible, and that conformity is what we really want.
Right.
And I think that comes from not knowing who we really are, right? I feel like a one-trick pony sometimes. I say it over and over again, because it really is like it's almost like, can the answer be this easy? And it's kind of like, yeah, it really is. Like and once we get it, it's like, just keep hammering that nail in, that we have to realize that, first of all, we have race mentality. And what I mean by that is that life's a race, and that everybody comes in a different place. And so when we buy that hook, line, and sinker, we are looking for what we have to get ahead, how we can push someone behind, how it's about us. It's this me versus them mindset. And so really beginning to understand that there's enough in this world to sustain us all. Like, there really is. The only scarcity and lack is because we create it with our greed. And so, yeah. And so I think that when we begin to look at that and understand that I'm not in competition with someone else. In fact, they can do the same work that I do, but they have a different type of people who are going to be attracted to their message. And I have a different group of people who are going to be attracted to my style of message, rather. But we're really here to link arms and lockstep, walk together and take ground. And so it really has to be this constant like practice of understanding who we are, standing in the power of it. When the mind tricks come up, because the ego comes up, the ego is really what separates us, ego, beliefs, and fears. When that comes up, we have to deal with it. We have to do the work to heal from that. So one of the things that I say to myself when like if I see somebody who makes me feel a little inferior, I have to remind myself, like, I am who I am. And that is my superpower. That is who I was created to be. The presence, this infinite presence, does not duplicate itself. So the fact I'm one of a kind, I am someone who has the power that creates universes. I have the mindset of one who always wins, and everyone can win, right? And so I have to do these affirmations to remind myself who I am, who they are, celebrate who they are, applaud their wins, applaud their accolades. I had this vision one day. I was in a car, and when I say a vision, I don't want to say it in a weird way. It was just like I was daydreaming. And so, and so I was in the car, and I was seeing like a room full of light bulbs, right? And like knowing that every individual was a light bulb. And like, say that one of the light bulbs starts shining really, really bright, right? Our true nature thinks about it differently than our ego does. Our ego says, well, they must be closer to the source, and that's why they're burning brighter, or making some excuse, being insecure about why they're burning bright, right? But our heart space, our oneness place says, oh, it's possible. It's possible to burn brighter. And so that's an empowering situation, as opposed to being a diminishing of myself, right?
Yeah.
And so this is the type of thing that we have to open ourselves up to, so that we can stop looking at one another as something that is in our way, in the way of our success, We really just have to begin to practice it.
Yeah, I love that. I am who I am, and that's my superpower. That's so great. Thank you. There's been a couple of comments in the chat about scarcity versus abundance, and I want to just kind of dig into that a little bit more, because when I first left corporate America, I called myself an abundance coach. All right. And I came to recognize that the opposite of scarcity is not abundance, it's sufficiency. Because abundance gives us all, like, abundance is a trap. Like, there's never enough, right? When the truth of the matter is, we have enough resources on this planet right now to solve all of the world's problems in a pretty quick. It's just, there's people hoarding resources in some places, so it can't get everywhere. That's right. It's Lynn Twist talks about sufficiency, right? That it's about being in sync with nature, with what we need. Like, I don't need an all-you-can-eat buffet. Not, those are probably a thing in the past anyways, but
yeah, right.
I just need a little bit of protein and a little bit of fresh vegetables, and I'm good. So it's a kind of a nuanced thing, but thinking about, because I think this idea of thinking that we need more abundance is kind of what got us in this pickle in the first place. What do you think about that?
Yeah. So, I love that you said that. I think that it's twofold. Like, there's so much duality in this world, right? And so when I think of physical abundance, yes, absolutely. That's stuff that we don't need. It's abounds. It's just too much, right? But I do believe in spiritual abundance, right?
Absolutely.
So, yeah, right. So this idea that everything that we need is here, like, it's available and it's overflowing. And so when we have this mindset of spiritual abundance, we're not seeking this physical abundance. We are, looking for just what we need, because we're not worried about, I gotta, make sure that I have enough for tomorrow. Like Lysol, I don't know why I can't find it anywhere, but I mean, I'm like, don't they make enough Lysol anymore?
Yeah.
So it's that scarcity mindset that really does, and I don't believe that people are doing it maliciously. I think that it's
conditioning.
Really, it's conditioning. It's our mindset, but a lot of times we treat people who are doing it as not you, but we often kind of don't understand where that comes from, and it's a wound, right? And so that's another way of being able to have this oneness, see people operating in a way that is harmful to other people, but understanding where they're coming from in that, and then being able to, having the knowledge of where they're coming from, being able to spiritually address, like, it's like spiritual triage. You just kind of see situations differently now, energetically, and now you're like, I can't handle this in this way because they're not going to receive that. This is how I have to deal with this. So
yeah, we're really talking about being resourced from within. Versus looking at, like, I am already enough, I have already enough.
Yeah.
And I know that well is infinite.
Yeah.
Versus, I gotta go out here and grab. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. Let me see what other questions I have here. Okay. So the question is, so a person could do all the personal work needed, right? But if they stay in a bubble of whiteness, can they still do harm?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that.
Yeah. So, I'm very careful with my words. That's why I pause a lot. So, I think that if they stay, when you say stay in their whiteness, do you mean stay in the culture of their whiteness, or do you mean like they kind of stay in a bubble and they're not inclusive in their
so kind of both. What I was really getting at is, we've got a culture of whiteness, a culture that
Yeah.
says white is right
Yeah, yeah.
and everything else is less than.
Yeah. So when I wrote the book, I really believed, and I think I still do believe now, I think this is something else that we have to be willing to do, is say, I believe this, and I think I still do, and then kind of review it again. So I'm doing that now. I do believe that white was created as a culture of oppression. I believe that it was created to stratify these group of people based upon their skin color. And I think that there's no way to remain in a system and play by the rules of a certain game and expect to change the game. So I believe that what people who have identified as white should do, and this is just my belief, is that they need to learn how to connect back to culture. So I loved how you talked about in the beginning, us identifying ourselves. And I think that that is important, because when your ancestors came here to this country, they were not white. They were Irish, they were Dutch, they were French, they were Italian. And what happened was they actually experienced an oppression, right? The oppression was, hey, there's all these people around here. We want you guys to assimilate into this monolithic culture so that we can have power. And if you don't, then you'll be outside of the fray. So basically, I think that when people begin, especially people who identify as white, begin to look at it that way, that you will also begin to understand how whiteness has affected you.
Yes, exactly.
And yeah, and then it's about, if we're trying to tear down this system of white supremacy and racism, we have to tear down it completely. We can't stand in it and swim in it and think that we're going to be able to remove it. So I say that, identifying with your culture, and if you don't know what it is, Ancestry.com has great tests. I still identify, I have had ancestry, and I still identify as a descendant of Africa. I sometimes will say Nigerian or from Ghana, but I want to honor my whole continent. Like I want to honor all of that, right? And so I think that honoring where our people are from is so important. It's so empowering, and it needs to be done in order to value culture. Like if you don't have culture to value, you can't value someone else's culture. And so I think that's important for
also, if you don't value your culture, then you're reduced to the monolith that is whiteness, all right?
Yeah.
And or the monolith that is blackness, right?
Mm-hmm.
But this cultural understanding, and even like to take it a step backwards, is like the white folks who came to America were oppressed in the countries they came from.
Yeah.
Most of it was religious oppression,
Mm-hmm.
but it is the age-old thing of like, you get beat up at work, you go home, you yell at the wife, she yells at the kid kicks the dog. Like, it's just,
yeah,
it's kind of how humans are wired, unfortunately. So I think one of the ways to dismantle that is to really become more culturally fluent.
Yeah. Absolutely, and you just sparked my thinking about this idea that once we fix racism, like this whole issue of how we deal with one another is going to go away. It's not, right? Because this, like, racism is the fruit of the tree, right? The fruit is sexism, racism, homophobia, xenophobia. Like the root is us having this division mindset, this race mindset. And so that's why it's really important to me, while I love the efforts that are coming forward to promote anti-racism, I really think that we also, my grandmother used to say, reach for the stars and you'll never come out with dirt, right? I think that we're reaching a little too low. Like we just need to reach, well, actually we need to reach lower to get the truth. But you know what I mean? we have to go deeper, like raise the bar for what we really want to see in this world. And it's not just about being anti-racist. It's about everyone in their full expression of being accepted, being valued, not being diminished in any way because of their expression of being or how they live or who they love or who they worship. We really need to make this much bigger than just racism. And so that's what I feel like oneness really focuses on. It gets to the root, which is that division mindset.
Yeah, and that lie of separation, you know, and there's a question in the chat about, feels like a conundrum for those who want to reform capitalism. Can we ever be true accomplices to transformation as long as we're still inside the system? I think the short answer is no. But the longer answer is we're in this right now, that like conscious capitalism, for example, where one of the 4 tenets is stakeholder orientation. That's changing, inherently changing the system. So I don't know, and this is one of the things for me, like I might change my mind along the way with this. I don't know that capitalism needs to be burned to the ground and something else needs to be raised up in its place. At the moment, I believe that if we can work with the individual leaders, starting with the leaders at the top, and help them with this personal development journey that takes them from separation to oneness, that helps them reconnect with their inherent and intrinsic value themselves. And then that ripples out into the world. The stakeholder orientation versus just shareholder orientation will have a massive ripple effect out into the world. So.
Yeah, I think, you know, I don't always think that everything has to be burned down to the ground, as you say, right? Like some things are salvageable, but I don't think that race is, right? Like race is, it was created, I say this all the time. I'm like, would you, if a toilet bowl was completely cleaned out, scrubbed, all of that, would you eat cereal out of it? No. You'd never eat cereal out of it because it was ordained for a certain purpose, right? And so I'm not eating out of the toilet bowl. Thank you, Eric. I see you shaking your head. No, that's ridiculous, right? Who would do that? So, but I also think that it's important to understand if people are willing to co-create. And I think this is why co-creation is so important. And so I love what you guys are trying to do. It's about understanding and bringing people to awareness how a system is working, and seeing if it's salvageable, seeing if we can do something with it. Can we strategize? And there's this plan and strategy. It's fail hard or fail fast, right? So what you do is you just continue to try different things. And if it doesn't work, you don't keep along that same path. You just try another strategy. And so I think that as long as you guys are open to, you know, continuing to see, hey, how is this working? Is this working? Are we having an effect? Or are there people who benefit from saying that they're into this and not doing anything and really kind of taking us down from the inside, you know, then we have to restructure, we have to recreate, we have to re-envision. And so just not being stuck to a traditional way of being, because it's what we're used to, you know?
Yeah, and I think that's where it gets useful to really unpack the systemic nature of white supremacy and what the symptoms are, because when we can address the symptoms, and folks who know me well can be like, oh, there she goes again, like symptoms like defensiveness and perfectionism and either or thinking that are literally symptoms of a white supremacy culture. Like now it doesn't feel like, oh my God, how are we ever going to change this whole system?
Mm-hmm.
I can let go of perfectionism inside of myself. I can work with myself to not be defensive or not be as defensive. I can change the paradigm within my thinking from scarcity to sufficiency, from either or to both and. So I think it's really, and that's, I think the change that first of all triggered me a couple of years ago, but that I'm also seeing some friends are going like, whoa, once you see this, you cannot unsee it.
Yeah.
You know, but once you see it, now you don't have to be complicit anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the, you touched on this idea that we have to know everything, we have to be right, we can't look like we don't know what's going on. And that is absolutely a symptom. And I've never even thought of it that way. I just recognize that as, being a fixed mindset, right? This idea that this is the way things have to be. And I think that once we can embrace this idea that even once we're woke, right? Everybody's woke now, right? Like that there's, that's not a destination. Like this is a journey. This is a marathon. This is, once you think you've got it, guess what? There's someplace else. It's another onion level of layer of us peeling back how we don't live in fidelity to the values that we say we want to see in the world. And understanding that if we're not living to the values that we want to see in the world, we're a part of the problem that we're trying to solve. And you can't push something away and welcome it in at the same time. You really have to be that change that you want to see in the world. And so, yeah, it's a constant growth. It's a constant unfolding of who we are and our journey to oneness. Oneness isn't a destination. Oneness is a constant focus of how we want to interact with everything around us.
Great. I'd like to open it up to questions now. But before we do that, is there anything that I should have asked you that I didn't?
I don't think so. I think we got to everything.
Okay, great. So let's see. You can, if you have a question, you can raise your hand down at the bottom. That's the little button that says reactions. And you can click on it and it'll either give a little clap or a thumbs up. You do either one of those and we will call on you. And let me scroll through and see if there are any questions in the chat that I missed. Mike, here, let me, you can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Great. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Great. Thank you, Joanna and Pamela, for this conversation. It's very good. You said something earlier, Pamela, that I really resonated with. I'm noticing a lot of people feeling, including myself, feeling guilty about not being more active in solving this problem. And then I come back to, wait, I have my purpose, I have my calling, and if I follow that path, that's what I'm supposed to do in the world. And so I'm torn between doing that and feeling good about it, and you just said something about, hey, it's not okay to just be part of the current world and not being active. And so I'm trying to reconcile those things just for myself. And
sure.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I want to clear up is just when I say that, not everybody is going to be out protesting, but I often say to the folks that I coach, like, what do you do? What are you passionate about? And how are you using that towards social change, to improve inclusion and to promote inclusion and social justice? That's what I mean by, we do need to be involved with what's going on in our world. And we also need to figure out what that looks like for us. And then also, the other thing that I'm going to say is that I tell my clients as well, is that your biggest contribution to social change is your personal transformation. If you are doing the work to begin to review the systems of your behaviors and question yourself, I was talking to someone the other day and she was saying, well, I was, in the park and there was a guy and I started feeling really uncomfortable around him. And I said, okay, well, she was like, but I don't know if it was because he was Black. And I said, all right, well, why do you think you felt uncomfortable? Well, I was alone and, he was there. And I said, okay, you were alone. Was it nighttime? Was it daytime? It was daytime. Okay. All right, so have you ever taken an Uber before? And did you feel uncomfortable then? And so what I was basically trying to give her was another opportunity to look at why she was feeling what she was feeling. She wasn't really willing to deal with at the moment that, yes, she knew right away that she was uncomfortable because she was alone in a park with a guy, he was Black, she felt uncomfortable. And she kind of wanted to say, well, it was probably because I was alone, right? But what I did was challenge her to begin to question yourself, like question why you do everything. Like I do that all the time. Like, okay, I just had this thought about this person. Why did I think that? And so I think it's really about challenging ourselves to look at what we've been taught, how we interact with other people, how our circle looks. This is another thing, like part of our personal growth. Look at your circle. And if it's not diverse, then you may have some issues where you need to work on inclusion in valuing having people who are different around you. So like I said, this work looks different for everyone. And I think everyone can benefit, especially if you're just entering into this conversation, if this is new, if you have just had your eyes open to this world and how it really treats some people. I think that, you know, coaching is a great tool to just begin to have conversations and really open yourself up to the perspective and the value that others bring to our experience. And how we've kind of missed out on that because of, you know, us being able to be the only, you know, be with a room full of people who look just like us. Do you know what I mean? So I don't know if I answered your question, Mike.
No, it's great. And I do think there is something, again, it's an internal job. Mm-hmm. And it's me being comfortable enough with what I'm doing and feeling like it's connected to the work that's going on over here, and being okay that other people may look at it and go like, I'm not sure if what you're doing matters. And it's like, no, it does. And I believe that. So I'm going to march down that path.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? I think that it's not just this is this for all time, right? So we evolve. And that's what we're supposed to be doing is always constantly growing. And so that may be what you feel called to do right now because that's what it is right now, but it may be something else. It may go a little bit deeper. It may expand to another area, and just being open and comfortable to those possibilities is where I think it'll help you to be more open.
Pamela, we've got a couple questions here in the chat. The first is, how did you come to this belief in and understanding of oneness? Was there one thing or many things that brought you here?
So the whole book that I wrote was actually this journey to oneness. So I've always had understood like I was connected to everyone. Like I always really appreciated different cultures and people and differences. I've always appreciated that. I've felt the sting of being the only person of African descent in the room and feeling like, oh, I can't go to the sleepover because they're doing hair and makeup and you know, they don't have my shade, you know? And so I've always had this desire for justice, for oneness. And what I didn't understand was that for a long time, I went about it the wrong way. And I want to say it was the wrong way for me because I was wounded from my marginalization, the oppression that I had experienced, the wounds that I had, you know, accumulated throughout my life journey. And I was coming from a place of disempowerment. So I was trying to do the right thing, but I wasn't empowered because when I spoke to people, I began to feel like they're not listening to me. They don't care. Like they, you know, it's probably because I'm Black, like all of these things. And they were sometimes very true, right? But what I learned was that I had a whole lot of healing to do. I had to look at this journey of my life and how I was pulled away from who I really was and disconnected. And I had to learn how to reconnect back to my true self, my true nature, my superpower of being who I am, and standing in the authority of that, no matter how someone treats me, if someone listens, that I understand who I am and I understand my purpose. And so I got to this place, and then the operating table, as I say, became clear. Because I feel like at first I was operating on a body, my gut was slashed open, I had blood and guts everywhere, and I'm trying to sew it up, and I can't tell what's theirs, what's mine. I'm trying to heal something, and I'm the wounded healer, right? It's actually my life path number 11, wounded healer. So, you too? Are you 11? So, but once I began that healing for myself, then I began to see, oh, this is how, this person is also wounded. Now I can see their wounds clearly, and I can do this kind of triage, energetic triage, where now I know how to, the language that I can use with them that doesn't put static on our line, that I know how to connect with them even when they're triggering me because of their behavior, how to connect to that benevolent space in them. And so it was probably about a 2-year process of doing this inner work healing, the healing that I believe that we all have to do to come back to understand who we really are, and then begin to apply that to how we interact with people. And it's been life-changing. I'm thankful for all the rejection that I had in my past, because I realize it brought me to where I am right now. And so, yeah, this, I listened to a bunch of different spiritual teachers. My, spiritual teachers are very diverse. So, they're different religions. I call myself trans-denominational, I'm spiritual, but yeah, it was a process of just seeking to heal myself so that I could help heal my part of the world.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Another question, what's your advice around how to navigate love/sacred rage without the love and light spiritual bypass?
Okay, spiritual rage. So I believe that our feelings, our emotions want to be felt and felt deeply. And then I also believe that rage is a contracting emotion. So we can't stay there long. We got to use it like a trampoline. And, rage is not going to take us. Think about any time that you've felt rage. Has it ever created actions that were helpful to the situation? Right? So I think, like, I heard this term when I was in the church, holy anger, or, there's an anger that is rightfully placed, right? You're angry because this injustice is happening, but we can't stay there. We have to reach up for a higher emotion, and sometimes that is acceptance of what is. Sometimes that's hope, knowing that if I transform, if I can see into this situation and I can speak to it in a way that helps transmute that energy from a negative thing to a positive thing, belief, all of these higher level emotions are going to help us expand. We're going to grow from the experience, right? And then we also are going to be compelled into right action. So I think that sometimes these lower level emotions, while they need to be felt, we can't stay there. We really do have to do the work to expand. And that's part of our healing. That's part of oneness.
So it sounds like that goes back to the, taking responsibility and owning your spirituality. So it's what's the work that's yours to do?
Yeah. Yeah. And I was just thinking about this too. I was watching right after the George Floyd video came out, Yana Van Sant was doing a live on Facebook and just really trying to help some people who were really struggling with this situation heal. And she said, somebody said they had hit their knee on his neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. Like, they were so angry about this. And it is horrible. It's terrible. It's frustrating that someone would do that to another human being, right? And so she said, I get it. He had his knee on his neck. That was wrong. And she, you know, spoke to that. And then she said, we also have to think about, while we're mad about him having his knee on his neck, whose neck do you have your knee on? And it was it hit me like a ton of bricks, because we really do have to begin to look at, it's really easy to point at, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong, and not look inward, not change the man in the mirror, as Michael Jackson said. No, we really do have to begin to look at ourselves and how we may not do the same thing may not do it in the same way, but the effects are still the same. The oppression, the not seeing someone as valuable enough to dismiss them and dismiss their lives, their existence. We've all done that in some way. And so it's really about living in fidelity to what we want to see, the change we want to see in the world.
Yeah. I think it goes both ways, Pamela. We've got to ask ourselves, whose knee is on my neck, mm-hmm. and whose neck is my knee on?
Yes, yes, absolutely. That's what she said. And maybe I didn't say it right, but yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's really this understanding that we are all light and dark. We are all kind of getting it wrong and getting it right sometimes, in alignment with source and out of alignment with source. And our goal is to really always focus on being in alignment so that we can be these leaders, we can be the example for everybody to follow.
Great. Thank you. I think there's one more quick question and lots of thank you, thank you, thank you.
I just opened my chat. Thank
okay,
you.
Good. So I'd like to know how you reconnected to who you really are. It's so messy to get into, and underneath the armor, sounds like you found oneness, but what did you find that you really are? So I think that's a bit of a nuanced question.
Yeah. So it is, because when I realized who I really am, it's not anything that you see right now. It is this benevolent presence that has the power to create universes. I'm not saying I'm God creator, I'm an extension of that presence. And it does not turn on itself. It cannot. It always provides for itself. And there is nothing that it can experience that doesn't allow it to continue to expand, because it's infinite. And so how I connected with, that's who I really am. And that's who in my hardest moments, that's who I have to realize and remember and go back to, that's who I am. Now, on another level, so I feel like that's the oneness level, right? On another level, I'm creativity. I am love. I'm an encourager. I'm a problem solver. I'm someone who sees the best in people, who loves to talk to people and understand them and make them feel comfortable. That's who I am. I am not held back by how I present in the world, as long as I understand this fundamental who I really am, right? And so it's this duality of life, that understanding that we are spiritual beings. We're here for a mission and a purpose and a reason, and all the things that we go through is to bring us to this greater awareness of who we are and who everyone around us is. And we're better for it. So I hope that answered your question.
Thank you, Pamela. That was absolutely gorgeous. Thank you so much for joining us today. I know Cheryl has an invitation for us before we go, but I've so enjoyed and appreciated your time and the conversation. So thank you.
I enjoyed it thoroughly. Thank you all so much for having me. I really appreciate your time and just your energy. Looking at you all has been such a joy, and so I thank you for sharing with me.
Great. All right, Cheryl.
Hi, Cheryl Leong again, zooming in from Ohlone land occupied by the city of San Francisco. We would love for you to renew your membership if you haven't, and if you are interested in joining us, we need our membership. We value every member. Your presence is so wonderful for our community. So if you're interested, the link to either renew or join us is right there, and invite all your friends. And yeah, we want to bring you more of this stuff. So we would love for you to join or renew. So see you soon.
Great.
And thank you so much, Pamela. That was awesome. All of us just had a couple of woke points, like it just went up.
Yeah.
More consciousness to conscious capitalism.
Yes, consciousness.
So I want to invite everyone to just unmute yourself, and we're going to do a conscious goodbye. On the count of 3, everyone will say their goodbyes. All right. So if you haven't unmuted yourself, I'll give you another second to do so. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank
Au
you.
Okay,
revoir.
everybody.
Peace.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Peace, love, rock and roll.
Yeah.
Was that you, Monique?
Yeah.
Of course. Awesome. I like it. So long, everyone.
All right. Bye, everyone. All right. Thank you so much, Lisa.
Thank you.
We'll connect. We can connect tomorrow via Slack. Okay.